Okay, cool. So first up, we have Jason Fried. Early morning. So he's been in tech since 2006 and was a Perl guru for most of that time, up until accepting a job with Facebook in 2011. And since then, he's been writing Python and has been a Python 3 advocate, good on you, since async.io came out, so quite a while now. Please welcome Jason and their talk, Rules for Radicals, Changing the Culture of Python at Facebook.
Awesome. So this is Rules for Radicals, the only all caps talk at PyCon Australia. That turns out to be my fault. I somehow did that. So my name is Jason Fried, like she said. I'm a production engineer at Facebook and Instagram. I started at Facebook in October 2011. That was a Halloween. Like she said, Perl had been my language choice for the 6 years prior. So I taught myself Python since it was more socially acceptable at Facebook than Perl was. It took about a year until I had the confidence as a new Python programmer to start taking an active role in Python at Facebook. For me, initially, I got started by helping out people in the internal boards, being the first to answer questions, and I kind of became internally famous, or infamous, in Python circles, and it became my favorite side project. Like, I sometimes neglected my primary job at Facebook to help people with their Python. When I saw issues in places where we were doing things wrong, I just kind of fixed them. And over time, people started to accept my expertise, and this is how most of Facebook works. It's not a top-down where you can command people to do things technologically. It's more from the bottom up. It's a meritocracy of ideas. You have to kind of sway public opinion by just the merit of your ideas alone, or use your social capital you've gained from helping them to you convince them that your ideas have merit. So it's kind of almost like open source. You can't force people to do what you want. So Python at Facebook is not as simple as deploying a script and running it. We have the problem of dependencies, dependency management. So instead of baking a bunch of virtual environments and deploying them via Chef to all of our servers around the world, and then hoping to God that the developers would keep them up to date and make sure they had all the dependencies needed, we solved that a different way. We solved it with a thing we called PAR. Now PAR, or a Python archive is what that's short for, is all the code for a thing, be it a script or a service or something, combined with all of its internal supporting libraries, its third-party dependencies, and any SOs that it may need to execute in our environment. These are all zipped up, and we append a shell script on top of it that handles the work of extracting and executing it at the destination. We build these much like C++ applications. We create a build config that has a list of all the source files, all the dependencies, all the libraries, all the C++ dependencies. And our build system, Buck, then builds all these dependencies that need to be compiled and then does the packaging of it. And that means that developers control their dependencies very close to their source. It's connected to the service and not the system in which it runs. We're then able to take these PARs and we can ship them all over the world to any machine at Facebook, and they will just execute as the developer had intended. They don't have to go mess with Chef, it'll just work, hopefully. So changing something at a company as large as Facebook takes time. So let me tell you a story about how during my free time, and with no authority whatsoever, I made Python 3 the default version of Python at Facebook. In 2013, the same time we were getting access to Python 2.7, we got access to Python 3.3 as part of a task to add Python 3 support to the build system. But the task had stalled out since 2012. It was blocking on adding Py3 support to our internal tools, and they were like, some people were saying, oh, we'll just automatically run 2 to 3. Well, of course, that didn't materialize, but that really didn't get us anywhere. It just like. So it was like we had installed Python 3 on my laptop, and sure, we had access to it, but didn't really know where it was. We didn't have code that ran on it, and it was all very theoretical at that point. It also didn't help that the popular opinion of Python 3, about Python 3 by engineers was very negative at the time. Most people in the company were either thinking of staying with Python 2.7 forever, weird, and some were talking about jumping ship to a different language, like, hey, let's all go to Go. And, you know, I said something along these lines internally once, and in my defense at the time, it looked very bleak that we'd ever be able to run Python 3 in production. And 2013, that was the truth of it. Well, at the time, only one person called me out and on my statement, and they challenged me to do something about it. So you see, change won't happen unless you personally make it happen. So though it wasn't all bad, we had a few things that were going for us. We had some rays of hope in 2013. In the very beginning of the year, when we got the new version of Python, an engineer in his infinite wisdom thought he could extend the life of his Python 2.7 code by forcing everybody to do these. Just import this in your code, and maybe our 2.7 code will live for the future. So he set up a code linter that would require these four infamous future imports, and it was they're pretty much used everywhere now at Facebook. They're ubiquitous. Everybody uses them. They may not know what they do, but they put them there because the linter tells them to. And so that means we had to solve a lot of our Unicode issues by the infamous Unicode littles. We had to solve them in 2013. And so by the time we got to Python 3, it wasn't that much of a big deal. Now we introduced other issues where people would make code that would accept a Py2 string or a Unicode object, and they would use base string for is-instance testing, and they didn't understand that Unicode was. So we had other issues, but it wouldn't make it easier in the long run to convert to Python 3. So it leads us to Thrift. Thrift is a remote procedure call and serialization framework that Facebook created, and we open sourced via Apache. And it's used extensively inside Facebook. It allows services to talk to one another. That's what RPC does. But this is one of those core dependencies that had to work for Python 3 to be realized at Facebook. And on October 15th in 2013, the Thrift team put out a poll to see if anybody would be interested in Python 3 support. This was 13 months after the stalled the stalled task to add 3 support to our build system. So you can see we didn't really move very fast there. And there were a few people that voted no. They said that we should never go to Python 3. It was just a waste of time. But there was actually a majority of people that voted yes. And I voted yes because I hoped that Python 3 refactor would clean up some of the things that I was very unhappy with how Thrift was handled in Python. I always thought it had made a venture through Java before it came to Python. So, and that was my opinion until this guy. So on October 16th, 2013, Guido van Rossum gave a talk at Yelp in San Francisco about Tulip, which would become what you know now as Async.io. A group of Facebook employees and I carpooled up to the city to see the talk, and this was the day after the Thrift poll had landed. I was already a fan of Async and Python 2. I've been doing G-event stuff. Yeah, it's dark time. And but Async.io in my head opened up this wonderful, magical future where different async frameworks could have interoperability, where library writers, me, wouldn't have to make this religious decision of what you, as the user of my library, would use as an async framework, that it would be left up to you. Well, before the talk was over, I was already on my phone messaging the Thrift team, like they need to support Tulip now, because they were saying that they were going to have to wait till G-event and Twisted support had landed in Python 3 before they could start, because that was the feature set they provided for Python 2. And I was like, no, let's not bother with that. We'll do Tulip now, so that when those things come out, hopefully they will have interoperability with Async.io. So I was able to convince them, and after his talk, I was very, very pumped about the future of Python. And on October 19th, when the Thrift team finally put up their project plan, including Tulip support was one of their #1 items. So Thrift for Python 3 became my new side project. This was my first attempt to change something at Facebook beyond my control, and 2014 would see even greater efforts on my part. Well, I wanted people to use Python 3 and Tulip at Facebook, and we had to make that at least possible, right? So I aided the Thrift team with code reviews and porting help, and by February 3rd of 2014, yeah, it takes a while sometimes, we shipped Python 3 support for Thrift. Well, for 6 months, it sat there unused. We had built the infrastructure, but nobody was using it. It was like those cities in China built during explosive urbanization and economic growth that they were left abandoned when they couldn't convince anybody to move there. I don't think we really had a plan yet for when we built Thrift. We just kind of hoped somebody one day would use Python 3. This was all about to change. I had been maintaining a system called FEpackage 2. FEpackage came about as a way to solve the problem of distributing code to our front-end servers. When an rsync fan out would take hours and hours to complete, we needed a better way. So we utilized this BitTorrent technology and to distribute the packages. And it also had this idea that after, you could do this asynchronously. So after the fact, you could request the package. It was so easy and it became very popular, but it was written in Python. But by 2013, it was already at least 5 years old, and it was starting to show its age, and it didn't age very well. And due to various reasons, most of them scalability, it needed to be fixed. So I had already been put into the position of having to maintain this thing. So instead of putting yet another piece of tape on this box, or maybe putting a ribbon on it and saying it's new, I decided we needed a complete rewrite. The existing code was just not worth fixing anymore, and so we needed a new box. So in August of 2014, I started a project to rewrite this service that I had become the misfortunate owner of, and I was going to call it FPPKG, which is short for FP package, and we were going to do a complete rewrite of the existing service using modern infrastructure and modern best practices. I wanted the service to be fast for many years to come and be free of the crushing technical debt that strangled its predecessor. And I was going to write it in Python 2.7 in Gevent. But it dawned on me that if I wrote this thing using Python 2.7, it would be obsolete from day one. And it would be baking into it technical debt that one day we would have to convert this system to Python 3. Because we had all just known that we were going to go to Python 3 eventually, we just didn't know how. So like I said, change won't happen on its own. Somebody has to be the first person. That person should be you. For Python 3 and Facebook, that person was going to be me. So like in the words of Gandhi, be the change you want to see. I wanted Python 3 to be a thing at Facebook. And I would have to be that change. I was about to become the driving force of Python 3 at Facebook. So I started writing FPPKG using Python 3. And everything was broken, as you'd imagine. No wonder nobody was using Python 3 at Facebook. It just didn't work. So I wrote a build config for my first FPPKG par, and it wouldn't even build. The build system treated Python 3 much like it would expect it to be Python 2.8. It thought it was in disguise. So the dependency tree refused to resolve because all the third-party dependencies in our system by default had been configured to be Python 2 only, so that we would save people the hassle of having to get Python 3 support. You know, what do you think? And even the thrift support that we had landed before was broken by the time I got to use it by people adding Python 2 only regressions over the last 6 months. And a lot of our swig and boost wrappers were and still fundamentally broken for Python 3 in regards to handling binary data. And when I resolved each of these issues to get my par to finally build, it traced back immediately when I started. The moment I executed it, but it wasn't in my code, it was in the base machinery that made par files work, was broken in Python 3. So while I was writing FPPKG, I was also fixing the world at Facebook, or at least as much as the world as I needed to get Python 3 to work. I had to rebuild hundreds of third-party modules in our build system and configure them to say, no, these really are Python 3 supported. And every time I needed an internal library, I had to convert it to be 2.3. And I did this myself. But I had a problem. Every day, somebody would commit a Python 3 regression. And in my dependency tree. And or they would upgrade one of those third-party 2 modules that I had just finished working on to be Python 2 only. And it was like it was a never-ending heel at that point. So, well, most of the regressions was code that, while valid in Python 2, was a syntax error or a name error in Python 3. So I had to force some compliance. Now, I said before, Facebook is not an organization where you can top-down control over the technology. That change has to come from the bottom up. Well, some of us engineers at the bottom can force a certain level of compliance if you handle it right. And I learned quickly, if you acted with authority, people would assume you had the authority. Well, I think I used up a good portion of my social capital in 2014 that I had built up in 2013 and 2012, and used my status as the perceived Python subject matter expert. And in late August of 2014, I instituted an automatic PyFlakes linter that would run on all new code when it goes up for review. PyFlakes was a good pick for us because it didn't have a lot of false positives. And I could sell it as improving our code quality. Since we already had a PEP8 linter, and people hated it or loved it, and we had the 4 imports linter, people didn't notice that I put an extra one in there. So I made sure PyFlakes would run under Python 2 and Python 3, so we would have the errors, we would know immediately if it was a name or a syntax error in Python 3 code or Python 2 code. So even if people were not writing Python 3 code, they would be have to be compliant by the linter to not commit obvious errors. So in effect, I was training people who didn't know it to write Python 3 code, well, sort of. This allowed me to distribute the job of maintaining Python 3 compatibility so I could focus on my project. So linting isn't perfect. You really need to do unit tests. So for all those libraries where I had to do the 2.3 conversion myself, I also instilled a unit test that I made sure ran under Python 3. So the team that owned that library would not themselves break me when they released new features. So I found that using unit tests was a little easier than filing a task to fix a regression after the fact. It was always easier to get people to fix something they thought they had broken. But it wasn't always easy for the people. I had to be responsive to the people's cries for help. At first, I spent a lot of time fixing people's Python 3 lint warnings. And I explained many times that name error Unicode is not defined was not a false positive, but a legitimate lint error for Python 3, and explained why they should care. Because if supporting Python 3 seemed hard, people wouldn't bother. They would regress to the, let's just stay in Python 2 forever, it's easier. And so I ended up making it really simple to write 2.3 code by patching our build system, kind of an evil thing to do, so that the third-party modules 6 and future were universally available whether you asked for them or not. So that when there was an issue, I could just say, hey, here's a snippet of code for 2 or future, so that you can write Python 2.3 code really easy without all the try exception mess, and without having to modify their build configs. I also fixed the defaults for our third-party module imports so that build config templates did not default to being Py2 only, that they would be default to Py2 and 3. This removed the consuming or time-consuming process of having to rebuild those modules on my own to fix regressions. With all those things in place, we were no longer losing ground in Python 3, but we were not really gaining any ground. I had joined the teaching rotation in 2014 for a new hire class we called Python at Facebook. It informed new engineers of the realities of Python at Facebook, and it prepared them for any gotchas they might stand in their way to begin their work. Because of the linters that we had put in place, the class already instructed engineers that they were expected to write 2.3 code. Because one day in the distant future, we were going to switch to Python 3. It was very unlikely at the time, and that date always kind of moved forward. But writing 2.3 code and only ever testing it in Python 2 wasn't enough to advance Python 3 at Facebook. We wanted to get to a future where people wrote Python 3 for new code and only wrote 2.3 code when supporting legacy systems. So in 2015, I took matters into my own hands, and I made a change to the class slides and informed the other teachers. I changed up the slides for the class and said that all new code, stepping on my soapbox, all new code has to be written in Python 3. And that you should never write Python 2 code unless it is for a legacy project. And even then, it should be 2.3 code, because either that project will die or one day we will have to do the work to convert it to Python 3. We taught them that everything should work, they should expect things to work, and if they don't, they should file tasks and they should complain very loudly or just fix it themselves. And that's what happened. I came up with this thing, educate for the future you want, not the present you have. The class was to educate them about the truths of Python. Well, this wasn't the truth of Python at Facebook. This is what we wanted the truth to be. And I started using it to defend myself to the other teachers and justify to myself that this was how we're going to get new hires to drive change at Facebook. And hell, most of the core dependencies had been converted to 2014, so everything should really have worked. All we needed was the people to show up and to use it to keep it from regressing and to make it improve. So for the rest of 2015, after I'd done all this work, I could focus on my project. So I worked on getting FPPAG as the replacement for FP Package 2 and had announced it as a service in January of 2015. But something strange happened. In 2016, I switched teams to a brand new team dedicated to shepherding Python at Facebook. Now, there was only 2 of us so far, but having the team name added a lot of the validity to our efforts. It added to that perceived authority. We saw slow but steady growth in Python 3 usage at Facebook. Internal discussions were regularly about Python 3, and every day we would hear about some new project that was Python 3, and that their new code, and it was obvious the tide of public opinion had shifted to be pro Python 3 at Facebook. Python 3 use was growing, even though it was not the default Python for new projects. You had to go out of your way to configure it to use Python 3. And we even used to say that Python 2 will probably always be the default Python, because it was just the easier thing to do. Well, not anymore. On May 2nd of 2016, I made a post expressing my intention, on my soapbox again, to make Python 3 the default version for the build system. One of the arguments that I used was that legacy versions of Python for new projects was a waste of company money. Since any project starting with Python 2 will at some point be upgraded to Python 3, why not save the technical debt and use modern Python to begin with? The post received unanimous support, and by May 5th, I had modded all the existing Python 2 build configs to indicate that they needed to use the legacy option for Python version, and made Python 3 the default in our build system. With the millions of lines of code and the thousands of pars that we have deployed, I didn't break a single thing. Nobody even seemed to notice for a couple days. It was kind of the next logical thing. People weren't angry. They were kind of happy. We started out in Q3 of 2014 with 4, just four pars. Actually, no, 3 pars. But one of them was the PyFlakes linter, and the others were part of my server side written. And that didn't change for almost a year. In Q2 of 2015, we had a 5th par come along. Sadly, we didn't maintain statistics after that for pretty much a year. But 2 days after I made the switch for default Python, we put in place an automatic stats gather that would count all the Python pars and would tell us whether or not they were 2 or 3. And well, we were quite surprised to see that we were already at 4% of all Python pars at Facebook being Python 3. And by Q3 of this year, we'd already reached 10%. So the green line is basically a linear projection I came up with between the 2 values. So I don't really have the data there because it was too time consuming to dig through our Mercurial repository to get the actual numbers. So the growth rate was largely unknown at that time, but you can see the blue lines. We know exactly what was going on there. So I would say this is a success. We now have Python 3 pars widely distributed since early 2015. We are pretty sure that we have the largest async I/O deployment. We're running on hundreds of thousands of machines. And we're growing by 0.5% week over week after making Python 3 the default. It is now generally expected that Python 3 will just work at Facebook. And only the most crusty libraries at Facebook don't have Python 3 support. And many teams are giving up supporting Python 2 moving forward. And even those that were once the most hardline anti-Python 3 people at Facebook have come around and are admitting that Python 3 is actually pretty awesome. So the future of Python at Facebook is bright as ever. Calls to replace Python with some other language are few and far between. And now we even have the weird issues of people breaking Python 2 legacy code by making Python 3 only regressions. So let's review. So you've got to lay the groundwork. Don't just say that we should move to Python 3. Make it an actual possibility. And change has to start with somebody, and it should be you. Pick Python 3 first for your projects. Get people to help you. Don't do it alone. And get them to help, even if they don't know they're helping you. So that's why I say install the sneaky unit tests and linters. And if you're not training your new hires already, you should train them for what you want to be. And of course, you should collect statistics. Don't be like me. But I guess at the time, I didn't know I'd ever make this change. So why would I ever track that information? If you want to know more information about Python pars that I've talked about, I know I ran through that really quickly. There's a talk tomorrow in room 103 by Dan, and it's the evolution of our packaging at Facebook. So go see his talk tomorrow and ask him some questions. This is where I work. Facebook paid for me to come to this conference. And I'd love to tell you that we are hiring. You can check out facebook.com/careers. And if you want to come talk to me after this talk, we can do that also. So questions?
Thank you. So if you have a question, just come up to the mic because this is recorded, so people can see it afterwards. Come on, Russell. Come on. I know you've got questions inside you.
I'm so nervous about asking questions. Thanks for the talk. The question about the linting process you were going through in the early days, where you were running PyFlakes over the Python 2 code base to validate Python 3 code. Do you understand that correctly?
Well, I didn't put questions in that answers in that last slide. I just said questions. No, I'm just kidding.
Yes.
I put it in place so even old 2 code would be linted against Python 3. We did have initially some keywords people could add to their file that would say, just break out of Python 3 linting, like if they knew it was like old crusty code. But most people just kind of did what the linter told them to do.
Right. So you were running like 2 separate linting passes. This is valid Python 2.
We basically have 2 files that were it was a PyFlakes for 2 and a PyFlakes for 3.
Right. Okay. Right.
Any others? Okay. Thank you very much.
Awesome.